All right, so this is my portion of the project in which I analyze our results. So just a quick recap: we designed this experiment to take a look at the Calvin cycle and how its function and how its function is affected, most notably in this section right here, because as we learned, CO2 is essential in the formation of glucose within the Calvin cycle, but we've also learned that the Calvin cycle can use O2 it can take in O2 in this. Rubisco can use it. However, the O2 will result in the Calvin cycle not working, and hence further inform us with other things that I will discuss in the future in reference to what we learned in the experiment. So to test out, so we designed the experiment to test out the Calvin cycle. So here's what we did. So we already recapped that, but this is essentially what our thing was at the beginning. So as a quick reminder, we had our control, which was just natural air. We had a glass that was pure CO2 and a glass that was pure oxygen, and then they were all sealed and left that way. And here is our results for that experiment. So it can be kind of difficult to tell in this picture just because of the way how the root coloring is very similar to the background color, but I'm going to try my best to point it out and articulate regardless. So first off, we'll start with the control, because that's it's a good point starting off, a good point of comparison. So here in the control, we notice that there has been some foliage development. There's definitely more biological material, especially coming downwards. We noticed an increase in the actual mass of the duckweed that was present inside this jar. In addition, there was definitely some root formation here. Duckweed being the versatile plant that it is, this root matter was not here before. So we can note that there was definitely some growth here, and that was, of course, to be expected, because this is the environment, the natural air is what the plant is used to and what it thrives in. So this was, of course, expected and why it was used as a control. So next we have oxygen, which produced an interesting result. So now so you can note here that there's a loss in plant matter from what was previously established, which we kind of expected, because when it's just O2 entering the Calvin cycle, it can't complete the Calvin cycle as it's not replenishing that Rubisco, that RUBP, and the Rubisco it's using the energy to do that, and it's not doing anything because it's not even building up glucose, it's not replenishing the RUBP. So we noticed that's still going on. So we notice it's going on, so hence why the plant is falling apart, because it's not making the glucose that it needs to repair itself and build itself up. But an interesting note, and it may be difficult to see just based on quality camera and the fact that I'm filming computer, but you may be able to make it out. But there is actually root structure here, which is interesting. Because it suggests that perhaps there's other mechanisms at work here than simply just the Calvin cycle, or perhaps that there was some leak, some source of error, because these weren't exactly industrially sealed. They're just by hand, so it's possible that there was some kind of a leak or something, because this would go against our expectation that the plants would simply just start to shrivel up and die because they can't rebuild themselves. So that's an interesting kind of result there in the formation of root structure. Next, we have a very interesting kind of result. So you can see here that there was also an increase in plant matter, which of course is to be expected, because you need the CO2 for the glucose to build up. And there's also root structure here, but if you notice, and this was observed, these observations were all made prior to this filming. They were made of note of earlier, so we're not just going off the picture. We're actually examining the jars first. But you can see that there is root structure here, but the roots aren't actually attached to the plants, which is interesting, because we expect, of course, that this would perform at least as well as, if not better than, the control, just strictly off the knowledge that we learned that CO2 is necessary in the Calvin cycle because CO2 is going to come in and it's going to, pardon me, because CO2 is going to come in and it's going to, enter the Calvin cycle via Rubisco. Rubisco is going to attach it to the, keep it going. It's going to keep going around the cycle. It's going to end up forming the glucose and replenishing the RUBP to start the cycle all over again. So we would expect, as I said before, we would expect the CO2 to do at least as well, if not better, than the control. But that doesn't seem to be the case here. It seemed to have worked, and then at some point something went wrong, because for the roots to detach like this that's not a regular occurrence. So something's clearly gone wrong. So some possible explanations for this are the plant has used up all the CO2 and was left with nothing. It was left with nothing to use, and so hence the root structure died out. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that perhaps the plant was somehow sick, or there's something wrong with the plant itself, something out of our control that we had no possible way of knowing. Although in terms of the Calvin cycle, the fact that it runs out of CO2 would probably be the most plausible solution. So while our results didn't match what we expected, our results somewhat went along, but there was elements like overall our experiment went along with what we predicted, but there were some elements when you dive into the specifics that kind of went against what we predicted. But there are some plausible explanations for it when you actually take a look and kind of try and reason it out rationally. And like those, we talked about those sources of air, those fact that it's not industrial sealed, so air can escape, which is key, or you get in. Both of those elements are key. The fact that it's just like it's perhaps there wasn't enough water. It's very taking the duckweed out is very difficult to get an exact amount of duckweed, so there's a different amount of duckweed in each thing. It's impossible to say for how long, because we know that even though we pumped CO2 and O2, it had to be exposed to natural air at some point. So perhaps that played a factor in it in allowing it to, build up structure, or perhaps get rid of that extra CO2 that it needed. And even just putting the air in itself, it's the invariance, the imbalance in those times. And also the fact that we left it alone over the weekends and over school nights after hours. So it's entirely possible that perhaps someone else, although I'm sure possibly someone else, like in their absence, first thought it was like, oh, I need to clean this up. And then they realized and put it back, and we would be none the wiser of that. However, it would definitely impact the experiment. So those are some possible sources of error. I would certainly hope that my partners would have mentioned this earlier. Would have mentioned the hypothesis, the independent variables and stuff. But to conclude, our conclusion would be that this experiment would demonstrate the effect that gas has on the Calvin cycle, with some elements that need to be examined in further detail to probe for possible explanations, and possibly a further repeat of the experiments to, as it's very important to science, it's very important to science to not only have good results, but to have repeatable results, because that's how something gets proven. So perhaps to run the experiment a couple more times and see what the results are there. I would certainly hope that my partners would have mentioned the dependent variable, the independent variable. The independent variable being the growth of the plants, the dependent variable being the gas. Pardon me, inverse. The independent variable is the gas, and the dependent variable is the growth of the plants. Pardon me, I seem to have got that one mixed up. That's my bad, but thank goodness I corrected it. So yes, I believe that just about sums it up for my part. I thank you for watching. This video seemed to have dragged on a lot longer than I would have liked it to, but I believe I've covered everything extensively. For anything further than that, I suppose I hope you have a good weekend, and yeah, thanks for watching. Have a nice night. Bye.